Thank you again, and let's get started. Our first question, we'll start with Claudia, is what makes you the most excited to be on the NYLA Council?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me first. I just want to say that I think this is a really exciting thing for NYLA to have these candidate forums, and I hope the fact that there are only a few of us on the call is not an indicator that there's no interest. I'm sure it's just that everybody's getting back from lunch and they're going to join us any minute now. But in any case, I'm excited to be on council again. I was on NYLA Council as the president of the leadership and management section back in 2012, and I enjoyed that year so much, getting to see more clearly how the organization works and just getting to communicate and connect with people from other types of libraries that I ran for treasurer of NYLA. And I did that for a couple of years. And again, each time I sort of step away from council, I feel like I want more. I want to be more involved. I want to be, having a little bit more responsibility and more connection within the organization. So that's really why I'm psyched to be here. I just have to say it's really odd to be looking at myself, and Annalie looks beautiful in this picture, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is really awkward. Anyway, thank you.
And Annalie, what about you?
Okay, I hate that my headshot, so thank you, Claudia, for saying something nice. It's not my favorite. It's just the one I got the last time I was on council. I think Jeremy has them taken so he can use them as blackmail later on. I am excited to be back at the idea of being back on council. Also, I, like Claudia, served as president of LAMS and was on the council for a year. And I'm really excited at the idea of creating more transparency about what council does and how NYLA decisions are made. When I was new to the organization, I was completely mystified by it. And until I spent that year on council, I didn't have a real understanding of how things worked. And I think that can present a barrier to a lot of people who are newer to the profession or newer to the organization. We do a lot of great work at NYLA, and I just want to make it easier for leaders at all levels to get involved. So being a membership organization means that we're only as successful as the people in the profession who volunteer to serve. And our lifeblood is really member involvement. And if we want to avoid burnout among our group or staleness, we need to be constantly searching for ways to bring people in and make them feel welcome. And so with all those new people come new energy and new ideas. And I'm really excited about that and trying to be engaging with our group.
Great, thank you. And Annalie, we'll stick with you for the next question. How has your experience as a librarian prepared you to be NYLA president?
So I'm not sure anything can truly prepare you for a job like NYLA president. I feel that way about most of the jobs I've had. Till you're doing it, it's kind of hard to feel really prepared. But I think that being a librarian and a library director is a lot about relationships, which is true of the NYLA presidency as well. We're a profession of introverts mostly, but the job forces us to be extroverts. Those who know me probably know that I'm much more of a natural extrovert, which makes certain parts of my job easier. I think as an organization, we're made up of so many types of libraries in all shapes, sizes, locales, and so the relationship building is really integral to leading NYLA and answering all of our members' concerns, making everyone feel welcome. I also have a varied background in librarianship. I've worked in law libraries, I worked at the Division of Library Development, academic libraries, rural libraries, urban settings. So that variety of librarianship has given me a good idea of how all the moving pieces of the organization fit together and help move us forward.
Great, thank you. And what about you, Claudia?
Can I just say what she said? I too have had a pretty varied career. I started as the archivist for RCA Records, so I started in a corporate environment, and then I went to New York Public Library, where it was the research libraries, which is a little bit more like an academic environment than your straight up public. And then, I think that so the majority of my career has been in public libraries, but I've been in charge of a municipal library and special district and association, and sort of many different kinds of varied jobs. As you get, as anybody from a small library will tell you, when you're like, you're the person plunging the toilets and also having board meetings. Anyway, so I think that having that sort of varied career and the skill set to work also with the board and with the town. I was on the Regents Advisory Council for Libraries, having that look into how libraries are organized at the state level, I think has been really interesting for, and I feel like having that experience, I would think I'd be able to bring a sort of larger perspective to the role of president for NYLA.
Great, thank you. And so our next question is, in terms of advocacy and state aid and construction aid, do you guys have plans on how you're going to help mold that next year or 2 years when you are president? How would you think you'll approach advocacy differently?
Is that my question to start?
Let's go ahead, Claudia.
Okay, thank you. Well, one of the things that we do consistently in libraries at a small level is, we ask for what we think we're going to get. And I think that the tax cap environment that we're in right now at the state level only promotes that. You're only going to get a little tiny bit, and don't even bother to ask for more. Right at the state level, don't even bother to. I've addressed the Assembly Committee on Libraries or on Education and Libraries, and they essentially said to us, "Hey, we know we're not paying you what state law says. Don't even tell us that. We don't want to hear that." Like they don't want to be taken to task for the things that they're not doing. And I found that really fascinating and just entirely chagrining, because the only way you're going to get what you need is to ask for it and to demand it. So the NYLA Libraries or Education Advocacy program has been really successful, and as we go at an Advocacy Day and events where we talk to our legislators, they're parroting that back to us, and that's awesome. But I don't think that they really, they're going, no, it's great. We know you guys are education, but the dollars aren't there. So I think we really need to get a little bit more guerrilla about it. And I don't, I don't know what that means. I'm not saying like duty bombs or anything, but I think we really need to get in the faces of our legislators and make them see that we're not just saying that we're education because we're chartered by the Education Department, although we are, but that is so much more. And I think a big part of that is really getting legislators into our libraries and the libraries of all kinds. I mean, we in public libraries have gotten better, I think, at inviting our local legislators to come to events. They're there for our groundbreaking, and they might send some kind of proclamation through about summer reading, but the academic and school libraries, I think, need to have those connections too. So I would try to help form those bonds or strengthen those bonds.
And what about you, Annalee?
So I think this year was actually, I'm on the legislative committee at NYLA. This was my first year there, which has been very exciting. And I attend Advocacy Day in Albany every year. It's like Christmas to me. It's my favorite day. It's so much fun to be around all these librarians and going to talk to our legislators and hearing positive things. This year is a little different because we had all of these, whether or not it was nationwide, we had sort of a blue wave in New York anyway. And so a lot of our legislators changed over, and a lot of our major champions are no longer in positions of power. And so I think there is some re-education. We had gotten, as Claudia said, we had gotten to a point where they were parroting back our sentiments to us. And I felt a little less of that this year because the people that we're talking to that have power are sort of newer faces at this point. So I do think there's some education that has to go on, sort of a double down of our efforts to really, in the first years of these advocacy days, we used to push really hard with these messages, and then it got easier, but just by the fact that these people had heard us so many times. So I do think we're dealing with a new crowd, and I do think that possibly, I know NYLA has started some efforts, and it's been, a part of our process to be talking about the census. And I do think that that's one way that we can kind of drive home our value to a new group of legislators. They're going to need us desperately. They are going to give us some money, $20 million, which is not, nearly enough, which we're used to. I think that census effort could be something that, depending on how we publicize it and kind of talk ourselves up, we could really bring home some financial value, which would matter. If you're asking for money, I think you have to prove to the government what you're going to do with it. We all know what we do with it, but we need to show these new legislators what we do. And I think the census is something that, especially at a state level, it affects WIC and CHIP and HEAP and our representation at the federal level, like all of these things that are really important to our local legislators that we can use that to leverage some support in a financial manner, which is what we really need. And I also think this year we took a different approach. We have been asking for just kind of, a little bit of money. And this year we swung really big and we didn't get there. But I like that idea of trying to, you're not going to get what you're asking for anyway, so you may as well shoot for the moon and see where you land. So I thought that approach, could work if we have to work at it some. And I think there were a whole bunch of variables that were different this year on the legislative scene than there have been. So, I mean, I'm all about advocacy. It's one of my favorite parts of my job at a local and a state level. And I'm excited about the idea that I think that really what we need to do is find some ways to show our values. So like the Real People, Real Dollars campaign, which started at the Mid-Hudson system that I work in and is now statewide, is a huge part of that because it's putting a dollar value on what we do. And I think we're way too modest as a profession most of the time about what we do, but we need to remember that our job is not to prove how much we can do with nothing. And so being successful is great, but you also don't want it to become your downfall because you've shown them you don't need any money to do all these wonderful things. We do need money. And so I think, it's finding ways to leverage what we do and to turn it into dollar signs to show them that it's worth the investment that they're making.
Great. And so our next question is, as directors of public libraries rather than public library systems, how would you make sure NYLA has adequate resources for advocacy? And Annalee, we'll start with you.
I think that we do need to look at the fact that we benefit library systems. NYLA as an organization benefits library systems tremendously with our advocacy efforts. And so we also need to make sure that we're funding the library systems and the library systems are funding NYLA. It's kind of a reciprocal relationship, I feel like. I'm not at a system level in my work, but I do work a lot with my library system. And I think that it's I don't know, this is a hard question in some ways, to me anyway. I think that the system is this amorphous thing that people don't understand. And so it comes to, like at Advocacy Day, the systems rely on the member libraries to talk us up, the system up a lot because the legislators know what a library is, but they don't necessarily know what a system is. And so the public libraries do this work of being the public facing part of a library system. NYLA, because it's supporting these advocacy efforts, also needs the support. It doesn't have huge streams of income either. Library systems and NYLA both have struggles with finances in a lot of ways. Like they're both underfunded. They're both in need of support financially. And so I think it's a symbiotic relationship. I think if NYLA keeps doing its work with the systems, then we can also go to those systems when we are in need of support. And it might be about the way we structure membership fees or organizational memberships. But I would definitely be looking for some advice on that from some of the NYLA council. That's the great thing, is that you don't, just like being a library director, you're not going to be an expert in everything. You just need to know who to talk to. And both NYLA as an organization and the council of NYLA have a lot of expertise and a lot of years of service among them, including system membership. And I do think, too, strengthening the relationship with NILES, the Alliance of Library Systems, because it encompasses all types of libraries, not just public libraries. So I think that that's an important relationship that needs as much attention as we can give it, to see what they're looking for as priorities and what we can do as an organization to then garner their support when it comes to financial needs and things like that.
Thank you. What about you, Claudia?
It was a while ago when you asked that question.
I can repeat it for you.
Thank you.
Yep. As directors of public libraries rather than public library systems, how would you make sure NYLA has adequate resources for advocacy?
Gotcha. Thank you. Well, I'm going to cover some of the same ground that Annalee just did so eloquently. When we go to Advocacy Day, all of that work that libraries are doing, is at the system level, is for the systems. And so, we're talking about all the great things that are happening in our libraries as a way to showcase the work that the systems are doing for us, because we know that we know, as the library people, we know how much we rely upon the systems. But as Annalee said, it's a little bit amorphous, what a system is. And conversely, when I first had library staff members going to Advocacy Day, we were sort of I was sort of explaining to them, the work that we're doing today is not really for us. I mean, indirectly it is, but we're not going to get any money really at the end of the day today. What's going to happen is we're funding our systems. and that has a benefit for us on at our financial level. But so it's like that snake with the tail thing, it kind of goes around. But I think that yeah, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I apologize, but I think that was pretty much it.
No, that works for me. Aside from both of you being public library directors, the other thing that you both have in common is that you were LAM's president. Claudia, can you talk a little bit about how the LAM's leadership can relate to NYLA as a whole leadership?
Oh, absolutely, and with great joy. When I started, I joined the LAM's board, the Leadership and Management Section board, in 2009, and that was, I think with all of us sitting on the board at that point happened to be from public libraries, and I know that over the years it's sort of ebbed and flowed, but at that moment in time, we sort of were like, hey, we really need to expand. Leadership is not a public library thing, nor is leadership a library director thing. People take leadership roles at all levels of organizations, and so we really went out and tried to cultivate some other relationships in other library types that we had. School librarians, we had an academic librarian, specifically on the LAM's board, and all it does is provides a much richer ground for discussion and for learning for everybody. And that's one of the nicest things about LAM's section of NYLA, is that it really, it's like kind of a free-for-all. Anybody can join. You don't have to be a director. You don't have to be a public. You don't have to be anything. You have to be a NYLA member. And so we really worked hard to make that happen. And I think the fact that the section is so healthy and puts out the kind of programming that it does, I think is just a testament to that.
Thank you. And Annalise, same question.
So I agree with a lot of what Claudia said. I came on to LAM's as she was leaving us, unfortunately, but so we didn't get to work together too much on LAM's, but I was on LAM's for a year or two, and then I became the president of the section. I think that there are some obvious things that are similar between that and running, being president of NYLA, which is just the general grind of what you have to do for meetings and things like, organizing meetings, putting together agendas, managing a meeting, which I think as both LAM's president and directors, we've both done. So there's that part of it. And I agree that LAM's is always striving to kind of increase its reach, which is something I talked about early on, about wanting to remove barriers to membership, encourage new people to join, whether they're new to the profession or just new to NYLA. And I think the leadership at every level is also something where we could look at paraprofessionals in the field and how we can remove barriers for them, because many of them would like to become certified librarians, but maybe have barriers that are financial or time-wise, things that leaders in their field could help to ease the barriers, and especially NYLA as an organization could work towards removing barriers to get those people involved, because I do think it's relationship building. It's about finding people who aren't engaged and finding out why, and then trying to do what you can to engage them, because the more people in our profession that are engaged, and that's geographic distribution, because NYLA is frequently in the central kind of corridor of New York. That means Long Island and the city and way up near Plattsburgh sometimes feel maybe a little more disengaged from NYLA, and I think that's an area for growth that we can work on. And I think that's similar to what we've done with LAM's. We have LAM's members. We have a much more geographic distribution than we used to, and that's been through conscious effort of the leadership of the group. So I think that there's a lot of overlap. A section is like a smaller set, but it's essentially, if you take that and blow it up some, it's very similar to, particularly the leadership and management section, because NYLA is all about developing leaders at every level. So I think there is a lot of overlap there.
Great. And I'll put out a last call for questions to our attendees. And while everyone's getting the last amount of questions that they have in, I want to remind everyone that our forum for the treasurer-elect is tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And we have one for the ALA chapter counselors in 2 weeks. We're still getting a time together for counselor at large, both school and academic and special. Okay, we do have one question that slid in there. Annalee, we'll start with you. Holding the position of NYLA president seems to come with a certain degree of working on new or interesting initiatives. What is one initiative project that you have implemented in your career that you are proud of?
I guess working at my current job, I am at the Kinderhook Library, which is a fairly, I would say, suburban/rural, smaller library in Columbia County, which is outside of Albany. When I came here, we had a great library. We've always had a great library. But the biggest thing I guess I've done in my career and in my job here was to lead a 3-year capital campaign where we raised $2.3 million and expanded our building. We tripled the size of it, and that just completed last December. So for the 7 years I've been here, that's the largest project I've worked on, which, you know, the capital campaign itself was a lot of work and something completely new to me at an administrative level, at least. I've been at libraries that have done capital campaigns, but I never led one before. And it was a lot of work. And I know, you know, consider myself lucky to have had the experience, because many people don't get the chance to have that kind of start to finish experience. And then on a smaller scale, I guess, like our community is fairly rural. And so when I came here from an urban library in Albany, I wanted to kind of bring some exposure and diversity. So I started a multicultural music program that we did a couple summers in a row. I got grant funding and brought all different kinds of world music from all over the place to the town of Kinderhook for my patrons to come and listen to for free. And I felt like it was a small step, but it helped bring the bigger world to our smaller community. And it was one of my favorite projects that I've done here. It was a lot of fun to attend, and I thought it did have an impact. Like I've seen in the time I've been here, the community opening up, and I feel like those kind of projects are what enables that to happen.
Thank you. And Claudia, what about you?
We are at Haverstraw. It's so, Emily, just listening to you, it's just really funny how parallel we are really. We both have brown hair, but also I've been at Haverstraw for just, about 7.5 years. So it's, glams and, it's just really funny. Anyway, so one of the things that we worked on here at Haverstraw, Haverstraw serves a population of 36,000, and we're suburban. We have 2 locations, we serve there are several kind of group homes in Haverstraw, and we have a pretty steady patron base of people who are coming from those homes in a group together and, spending some time here. And one of those groups approached us at the circulation desk and said, hey, could we do like a story time? And these are for nonverbal disabled adults. And we were kind of, and my circulation supervisor was like, I'll look into it. And so, approached our adult department and there wasn't really interest to do that kind of program there. Approached the children's department, and again, there wasn't really interest to do that kind of program because it was an adult population. And our circulation supervisor said, well, can I do this program? Can I do, a story time program or something like that? And I said, yes, of course. And so then we've started this really robust kind of program where our head of circulation brings in her therapy dog and does essentially a story time. And sometimes there's a craft. And we've also taught them some sign language. And it's just sort of an amazing thing. And as this program has grown, we have other groups coming to us saying, hey, can you do that for us? Can we do a craft? Can we do a different kind of thing? So what we've done is sort of take what some might consider to be a children's program and open it up to another population that we serve that we're really, frankly, underserving. And sometimes you have to, sort of think outside the box, which is a ridiculous phrase, but in a civil service environment like we are, your jobs are pretty well, you're pretty well prescribed as to what you can do. And if you're doing story time, but you're an adult in circulation, that's kind of, that's a little bit uncomfortable for some people. But I think, so I guess what I'm trying to say is the thing that I'm most proud of from an initiative perspective is really letting people step forward and take on some responsibility for things that might not be in their job description, but they end up, either being a passion or just a really great idea, and it flowers into something else entirely. And so it's very successful, and it's just a really good time.
Thank you. And our next question is, what ideas do you both have to build stronger collaborative relationships between both the NYLA sections and the NYLA Roundtables? Claudia, we'll start with you.
This is one of the things that I love about NYLA is that those connections. And so I think that a big part of growing those connections is really having conversations with people. And as president-elect and then president, and past president, I would absolutely be seeking out dialogue. I mean, I'm not an extrovert. I'm an introvert who works really hard to seem like an extrovert, I think. And it takes a lot of work, but it's also so rewarding to really seek out connection with people. So I think it would, in a similar way to what Michelle Young is doing right now, where she's sort of going around the state. I know Debbie Emerson has done that too in the past. It's really a matter of asking questions and just listening to answers, and then trying to pull people together. We're at Haverstraw, we're doing community conversations based on, Harwood Institute practice that we learned in 2017. And it's sort of amazing to hear what comes out of people's mouths and the connections that you can draw there. So I think it's about listening.
Thank you. Annalee, what about you?
So I agree with Claudia, no big surprise, about it being about relationships and about talking to people. I think I go back to kind of my management style, which is sort of to approach my staff regularly and kind of say, here's what I'm looking to do. Here's what we're looking to do as an organization. What do you need from me in order to do that? And I think a lot of times that sort of approach to it gets people to open up and really see you as an ally instead of somebody who's just demanding more from them, because I do think we need to be really conscious of the fact that all of these people at the section levels and at the roundtable levels are volunteers. Like this job, we all have paid jobs. So this is extra, right, for everybody. And I think, again, it comes back to removing some barriers and making things easier for people to feel like they're participating and to be successful at it. I think the more that we work together as an organization, all of the sections and everything together, we can avoid duplication of effort, we can avoid reinventing the wheel, and we can really, maximize our impact while minimizing the amount of effort necessary, because we're an organization that is just a brain trust full of really smart, talented people from all different sectors of the library world. And I think we need to, in order to benefit from that, it involves us having a good conversation and open lines of communication. And so I think, approaching these groups initially and introducing yourself and saying, look, I'm here to try and make your job easier. We appreciate what you're doing, and we need to figure out how to make it easier for you to do it. And also the idea that if we all work together, we're going to have much more of an impact than each little section or roundtable doing its own thing. We'll be able to make a much bigger difference if we can all find ways to, or at least initiatives, things that we can work together on, as opposed to doing our own separate thing.
Great. And it looks like we have time for one last question. So Annalee, we'll start with you. Being NYLA president involves working with a wide variety of people. How do you inspire people to work with you on different projects or initiatives?
Okay, so this is sort of similar to what I had just said about, like, I try to find ways that to look at the big picture and really, inspiration, I don't know exactly how you do that. It's a difficult thing to quantify, but I think really what it is usually at my job, I work at a very small library, and as Claudia said, I'm one of those people that plunges the toilet and, writes grants and talks to the board. And so you kind of have to wear all hats. And I think one of the things I have found is being appreciative of the people who work with you is inspirational to them. If they know that they're appreciated and they see that they're recognized, they work harder because they care. You have to, and when you're working with volunteers or staff that doesn't make a ton of money, or, in general are underappreciated, which is almost all of our organizations at some level, it's really important to show appreciation, to give kudos, because those things don't cost money, but they're valuable, especially in team building. And I think it's the idea of giving people some responsibility. Like, I think everybody loves to leave, or at least I do. I shouldn't say everybody, I don't know. I love to leave a meeting with a task that I'm supposed to do. And it gives me a sense of purpose. It lets me know that there's a finite amount of things that I have to do, because if I leave and it's just this broad strokes thing, I can feel overwhelmed by that sometimes. So I think, giving people jobs and then supporting them in their efforts to do them. You ask somebody to do a particular task, and then it's, what do you need from me to help do that? And you offer up your assistance where you can. I don't believe in asking people to do anything that I wouldn't do myself, so I don't stand on ceremony. I'm happy to, get down in the trenches and do what's necessary to make something successful, because when any one of our projects is successful, we all look better, and the organization as a whole benefits from that. So I don't know exactly if that inspires inspiration in the people who work with me, but I certainly hope it does. And I also think a healthy sense of humor is important, and I try my best to have that. I don't know that I'm always funny, but I have a lot of enthusiasm and a decent sense of humor. So I think those things all help too, because life is very serious, and I think sometimes we need to all take it a little bit less seriously and remember that what we're doing is fun and enjoyable too. It's for the greater good. It's going to benefit us all, and it can be a lot of fun while we're doing it.
Thank you. And Claudia?
I found that for myself, I think one of the things that helps people come along, I guess, on a project or just on the day-to-day work is to be sort of vulnerable as a person, I guess as a leader, but I ask for help all the time. And I find that, as Annalie was saying, like it's I'm not above doing anything. I'll, and that probably comes from having worked in many different kinds of environments. I mean, now if I try to hang a picture on the wall or something, my head custodian yells at me. But I was shoveling the driveway at my last job, so you take what you can. But sorry, I'm babbling a little bit, but I have found, even just yesterday, I was walking past a desk and somebody looked like they needed help, and I'm not the major helper anymore. In terms of being on the front lines, but I said, sure, what can I do? Let me see if I can help. And I sort of ended up getting involved in 3 or 4 different things and realized I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to mess something up. And so I went and found someone who is a page and also is a library school graduate, but she's currently employed as a page here, and said, can you please help me? Because you know how to do this way better than I do. And I feel like that, admitting that I don't know what's going on, sometimes I feel really gives people the opportunity to step in and be the expert on something. And I'm not doing it to make them the expert, but I am doing it because I genuinely don't know what's happening. How do I print from this to that, for instance, which is what the issue was going on yesterday. As I walked past and kind of made eye contact with one of the guys on the computers, I said, I don't know what I'm doing here. And he said, you're probably in charge, aren't you? And we sort of laughed. Yes, of course. But that's true. In an environment like this, as you get into a larger library, you have less jobs. My job is a little more focused than it was when I was at Tuxedo. But here I am babbling again. So being vulnerable and trying to not take things as seriously as it is. I mean, Annalie mentioned sort of having a sense of humor, but also just trying to put some fun into things, trying to, spread some light, I guess. So.
Thank you. Thank you both again for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm sure our attendees and members as a whole appreciate it, and everyone taking the time this afternoon to ask questions and get involved. And as a reminder, the Treasurer Forum is tomorrow, and our ALA chapter counselors will be having their forum in a couple of weeks. So I hope to see everyone there, and everyone have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you again.
Thank you.